After 5 years wrongfully imprisoned, the Alpha King returns home, but what he finds there. The iron gates of Blackstone Federal Penitentiary groaned open one final time for Marcus Donovan. 5 years, 2 months, and 17 days. He'd counted every single one. The morning air hit his face like a baptism, cold and sharp, washing away the stale scent of concrete and despair that had become his second skin. At 38 years old, he stepped onto free soil, wearing the same clothes he'd been arrested in, now loose on his frame. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms and built an empire from nothing had been stripped down to bone and sinew, but his eyes, those dark, calculating eyes, still burned with an intensity that made the guards look away. Marcus had been the youngest self-made billionaire in the tech industry, the founder and CEO of Sentinel Technologies. They'd called him the Alpha King in the business magazines, a man who'd revolutionized cybersecurity and built a company worth $12 billion before his 33rd birthday. Then came the accusations: insider trading, fraud, embezzlement, evidence that appeared from nowhere, testimonies that didn't add up, a trial that moved at lightning speed. His lawyers had promised appeals, but the judge had been merciless. 5 years in a maximum security facility, watching his life's work crumble from behind bars. Before we continue with Marcus's journey home, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's see what awaits our fallen king. The cab driver who picked him up from the prison kept glancing in the rearview mirror, recognition flickering in his eyes. Marcus ignored it, his gaze fixed on the passing landscape as they drove toward Westchester County. The world had moved on without him. Newer cars, different billboards, people absorbed in devices that hadn't existed when he went in. But some things remained constant: the sprawling estates that dotted the countryside, the old stone walls that marked property lines, the dense forests that had witnessed centuries of human drama. His destination was Rosewood Manor, the 20-acre estate he'd purchased 10 years ago. It had been Catherine's dream home, his wife, the woman who'd stood beside him as he built his empire. She'd decorated every room with meticulous care, planted the rose gardens herself, hosted charity galas that brought together the most influential people in New York. Catherine, with her honey-blonde hair and infectious laugh, who'd promised to wait for him no matter how long it took. The cab turned onto the private road leading to the estate, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. The trees formed a canopy overhead, filtering the late afternoon sun into golden patches on the asphalt. He dreamed of this moment every night in his cell, coming home to Catherine, holding her again, starting over. His lawyers had finally gotten the charges overturned 2 months ago, when new evidence emerged, proving the documents had been forged by his former CFO, Daniel Reeves. Daniel, his childhood friend, the man he'd trusted with everything. The betrayal still tasted like acid. As they approached the main gates, Marcus noticed they were already open. Strange. Catherine had always been security conscious, insisting on keeping them locked. The cab driver pulled up the circular driveway, and Marcus paid him with the little cash his lawyer had provided, adding a generous tip that made the man's eyes widen. "Good luck, Mr. Donovan," the driver said quietly, and something in his tone made Marcus pause. The front door of the manor was a massive oak affair, with hand-carved details Catherine had commissioned from a craftsman in Vermont. Marcus stood before it, his hand raised to knock, then stopped. This was his home. He didn't need to knock. But 5 years had taught him that nothing was certain, that the world could shift beneath your feet without warning. He tried the handle. Unlocked. The door swung open with a familiar creak he'd always meant to fix. The foyer was exactly as he remembered. Italian marble floors, the grand staircase curving upward, the crystal chandelier catching the light. But something was different. There were men's shoes by the door, expensive leather ones, size 12 at least. Too large to be Catherine's, and he'd never left his shoes there. She'd hated clutter in the entryway. Catherine? His voice echoed through the house, rougher than he remembered it. 5 years of minimal conversation did that to you. No answer. But he heard something. Laughter from deeper in the house, from the direction of the kitchen. Catherine's laugh, but different somehow, lighter, unguarded in a way he hadn't heard in years. And beneath it, a man's deeper chuckle. Marcus moved through the house like a ghost. his footsteps silent on the plush carpets. The living room showed signs of recent habitation, wine glasses on the coffee table, a jacket draped over his favorite chair. A man's jacket, not his style, too flashy, with designer labels Catherine used to mock. The laughter grew louder as he approached the kitchen. The swinging door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, Marcus could see them. Catherine stood by the island wearing a dress he didn't recognize, her hair shorter than before, styled in a sleek bob. She looked radiant, younger somehow, as if the years had reversed for her while they'd added decades to him. Beside her, his arm casually draped around her waist, stood a man Marcus had never seen before. Tall, athletic, probably mid-30s, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having faced real hardship. But it wasn't just their proximity that made Marcus's blood run cold. It was the ring on Catherine's finger, a new ring, a massive diamond that caught the light as she gestured while talking. It was the way the man kissed her temple, familiar and possessive. It was the photograph on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet, Catherine and this stranger, on a beach somewhere tropical, her head on his shoulder, both of them grinning at the camera. "I still can't believe we pulled it off," the man was saying, pouring wine into 2 glasses. 5 years and that bastard never suspected a thing." Catherine's laugh was sharp, victorious. Marcus always thought he was the smartest person in any room. That's what made it so easy. Daniel played his part perfectly, and the evidence we planted was ironclad. Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. The words weren't making sense, couldn't be making sense. "Do you think he'll ever figure it out?" the man asked, handing Catherine a glass. "Figure what out? That his devoted wife orchestrated his downfall? That every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every document was carefully crafted to put him away?" Catherine took a sip of wine, her eyes gleaming. "Even if he does, what's he going to do about it? He's a convicted felon. No one will believe him. And by the time he gets out, I'll have liquidated everything. Sentinel Technologies is mine now. Restructured under Raven Corp, the patents, the contracts, the offshore accounts, all of it. And us?" The man pulled her closer. "Us?" Catherine smiled, tilting her face up to kiss him. "We're free, James. Free and rich beyond measure. Marcus built the empire, but he was too proud, too focused on legacy and ethics. We're going to take what he built and make real money with it. The kind of money that comes from knowing which rules to break." James laughed, clinked his glass against hers. "To the Alpha King, long may he rot in prison." "Actually," Catherine said, her smile turning cruel, "I heard his appeal went through. He might be getting out soon." "Should we be worried?" "About Marcus?" Catherine shook her head. "He's broken. 5 years in that place? He'll come crawling back here, grateful for any scrap of his old life I'm willing to throw him. And when he does, I'll destroy what's left of him, this time permanently." Marcus stepped through the door. The reaction was immediate. Catherine's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor. James spun around, his face going pale. For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the steady drip of wine falling from the counter. "Hello, Catherine," Marcus said quietly. His voice was steady, controlled, but beneath it ran a current of something dark and dangerous. "James." Catherine recovered first, her face cycling through shock, fear, and then settling into cold calculation. "Marcus, you're early?" "Am I?" He stepped further into the kitchen, his eyes taking in every detail, the opened bottle of wine, the dinner preparations, the casual intimacy of their body language. "Early for what exactly? Early to find my wife with her lover? Early to discover that my entire life was a lie?" James moved, positioning himself slightly in front of Catherine. "Protective." The gesture made Marcus's jaw tighten. "Look, Donovan, I don't know what you think you heard. I think I heard my wife confess to framing me for crimes I didn't commit. I think I heard her admit to orchestrating 5 years of hell, 5 years of watching my company be dismantled, 5 years of sleeping on a concrete slab while she slept with you in my bed." His voice remained level, almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Did I mishear anything?" Catherine's mask slipped fully into place, the mask of the woman who'd built an empire on lies. "You're upset. That's understandable. But you need to think carefully about what you do next, Marcus. Is that a threat? It's reality. She crossed her arms, the new diamond on her finger glinting. You were convicted of federal crimes. That conviction was overturned on a technicality, but your reputation is destroyed. You have no money. I made sure of that. You have no company. Sentinel doesn't exist anymore. You have no friends. They all abandoned you. You have nothing but the clothes you're wearing and whatever pathetic pride you're clinging to. And you have everything, Marcus said softly. Yes, I do. Catherine's smile was razor sharp. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of this house, Marcus. You're going to disappear quietly, maybe rebuild some small, insignificant life somewhere far away. Because if you try to fight me, if you try to expose what you think you know, I will bury you so deep that you'll wish you were back in prison. How? The question hung in the air like a blade. How what? How will you bury me? With more lies, more false evidence? Marcus took another step closer, and both Catherine and James tensed. See, that's the thing about lies, Catherine. They require infrastructure. They require witnesses who stay bought, documents that stay hidden, partners who stay loyal. But I spent 5 years with nothing to do but think. 5 years to analyze every aspect of my trial, every piece of evidence, every testimony. 5 years to understand exactly how someone would go about framing another person for federal crimes. Catherine's confidence flickered just for a moment. And in those 5 years, Marcus continued, I made friends, real friends, not the kind who abandon you when things get hard. Guards who saw injustice and wanted to help. Lawyers who believed in the truth. Federal investigators who never quite bought the official story. Tech experts who owed me favors from the old days, who kept certain backup systems running, certain security cameras recording even after I went away. He pulled a small device from his pocket, a digital recorder, its red light blinking steadily. This house has excellent acoustics. Did you know that? I had the whole place wired for sound 10 years ago. Security feature. Catherine, you helped me pick the system. The color drained from Catherine's face. Every word you just said is recorded in triplicate. 1 copy is on this device. Another is uploading to a secure server as we speak. And a third is already in the hands of my lawyer, along with documentation of every offshore account, every forged document, every payment made to every witness who lied on the stand. James moved fast, lunging for the recorder, but Marcus was faster. 5 years of prison had taught him things the boardroom never could. He sidestepped, his hand shooting out to grip James's wrist with crushing force. The younger man yelped and Marcus twisted, sending him stumbling into the counter. Don't, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a growl. Whatever Catherine's paying you, it's not worth what I'll do if you touch me again. Catherine was already reaching for her phone, but Marcus shook his head. Go ahead. Call whoever you want. The FBI is already on their way. So is my legal team. So are the journalists from every major publication in the country who are about to get the story of the decade. The wife who destroyed her husband, stole his empire, and thought she'd gotten away with it. You can't do this, Catherine whispered, and for the first time Marcus heard fear in her voice. Marcus, please, we can work something out. I'll give you money. Half of everything. We can work something out. Marcus laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Like we worked out our marriage vows. Till death do us part, remember? For better or worse. You didn't just betray me, Catherine. You destroyed me. You took 5 years of my life, years I can never get back. You turned my best friend against me. You dismantled everything I built. And for what? Money? Greed? Or was it just the thrill of pulling off the perfect crime? You were never home. Catherine's composure finally cracked, her voice rising. You were always working, always building, always focused on the next deal, the next patent, the next conquest. I was alone in this massive house, and you didn't even notice. So you decided to send me to prison. Marcus's voice was ice. That was your solution, not counseling, not divorce, but complete and utter destruction. I wanted what you had, she spat, all pretense gone now. I wanted the power, the respect, the fear in people's eyes when you walked into a room. I was tired of being Marcus Donovan's beautiful wife. I wanted to be someone in my own right. And now you are, Marcus said quietly. You're a criminal, a conspirator, a fraud. Congratulations, Catherine. You finally made a name for yourself. The sound of sirens in the distance made them all freeze, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Catherine's face went through a rapid series of emotions: denial, anger, bargaining, and finally, resignation. "They'll never convict me," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'll get the best lawyers. You'll go to the same prison I did," Marcus interrupted. "That's what my lawyers are pushing for. Federal conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, perjury. You're looking at 20 years minimum. Probably more once they dig into everything you've done with Sentinel's assets. And there's no one to frame this time, Catherine. No one to take the fall for you." The vehicles were pulling into the driveway now. Through the kitchen window, Marcus could see black SUVs, unmarked sedans, and a police cruiser. Catherine moved toward the back door, but Marcus shook his head. "Don't run. It'll only make things worse." "Worse?" She laughed, hysterical now. "How could it possibly be worse?" Marcus met her eyes, and in his gaze, she saw something that made her blood run cold, not hatred, not rage, but complete and total indifference. The love that had once lived there was gone, burned away by 5 years of betrayal and suffering. She was nothing to him now, less than nothing. "You could have had everything, Catherine. If you'd just been patient, if you'd just been honest, we could have built something real together. But you chose this. You chose lies and betrayal and destruction. Now you get to live with the consequences." The front door burst open. Voices shouted, "FBI, hands up, get on the ground." James bolted, trying to make it to the back door, but agents were already there, weapons drawn. They tackled him to the floor, cuffing him with practiced efficiency. Catherine stood frozen as a female agent approached her, reading her rights in a calm, professional voice. She looked at Marcus one last time, searching his face for any trace of the man she'd married, the man she'd loved, before ambition had poisoned everything. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "No, you're not," Marcus said. "You're sorry you got caught." "There's a difference." They led her away in handcuffs, past the foyer where her expensive heels still sat by the door, past the living room where they'd entertained governors and senators, past the rose garden she'd tended with such care. Marcus watched from the doorway as they put her in the back of an SUV, her head bowed, her perfect hair falling across her face. He felt nothing. 5 years ago, this moment would have destroyed him. But prison had hollowed him out, left him with nothing but determination and the cold comfort of justice. He'd been the Alpha King once, a title given by admirers who didn't understand that real power wasn't about wealth or influence. Real power was surviving when everything was taken from you, and still finding the strength to stand. The lead FBI agent approached, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. "Mr. Donovan, I'm Agent Sarah Matthews. We'll need you to come to the field office to give a full statement, but I wanted to say personally, I'm sorry this happened to you. We should have caught this years ago." "You caught it now," Marcus said. "That's what matters. The evidence you provided was extraordinary. The digital trail, the recorded conversations, the financial records, it's airtight. Your wife and her accomplices won't see freedom for a very long time." Marcus nodded, his eyes still fixed on the SUV containing Catherine. "What about Daniel Reeves? Already in custody. We picked him up 2 hours ago based on the information your legal team provided. He's singing like a canary, trying to cut a deal." "Don't let him." Agent Matthews smiled grimly. "We won't. The DOJ wants to make an example of this case. White-collar crime, conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering. They're going to throw the book at everyone involved." As the vehicles began to pull away, Marcus finally turned back to face his house, his home. Except it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed, a monument to false happiness and lies. "Mr. Donovan?" Agent Matthews was still there, waiting. "Are you okay?" Was he okay? The question seemed absurd. He'd lost 5 years, his wife, his best friend, his company, his reputation. He'd been stripped of everything that defined him, reduced to nothing but DNA and determination. By any reasonable measure, he should be broken. But standing there, watching the sun set over the estate he'd built, Marcus realized something. He wasn't broken. He was free. Free from the lies, free from the betrayals, free from the weight of a life built on false foundations. "I'm fine," he said, and surprised himself by meaning it. The estate would be seized as evidence, of course. The cars, the accounts, the property, all of it would be frozen while the legal proceedings unfolded. But Marcus had been smart, smarter than Catherine had realized. He'd always kept separate accounts, investments she'd never known about, contingencies for worst-case scenarios. Not enough to rebuild his empire overnight, but enough to start over. And that's what he would do, not as the Alpha King this time, but as Marcus Donovan, a man who'd survived hell and learned what really mattered. As he walked away from Rosewood Manor for what might be the last time, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Not for revenge, he'd gotten that. Not for restoration of his old life, that was gone forever. But hope for something new, something real, something built on truth instead of pretty lies. The cab driver who'd dropped him off had lingered, curious to see the drama unfold. He stood by his vehicle, smoking a cigarette, and when Marcus approached, he ground it out quickly. "Need a ride, Mr. Donovan?" "Yeah," Marcus said, climbing into the back seat. "Take me to the Hilton downtown, and then I need you to make a stop at a Salvation Army store." The driver's eyebrows rose, but he didn't comment, just put the car in gear and headed down the long driveway. Marcus watched in the rearview mirror as Rosewood Manor disappeared behind the trees. He'd spent 10 years building that life, 5 years mourning its loss, and 5 minutes watching it all crumble. And somehow, impossibly, he felt lighter than he had in a decade. The news broke like a tsunami. Within hours, every major media outlet in the country was running the story. Wrongfully imprisoned tech billionaire returns home to find wife, orchestrated his downfall. The narrative was too perfect, too dramatic, too laden with betrayal and revenge to resist. Marcus's face was plastered across every screen, every newspaper, every website. The Alpha King Returns, they titled it, not knowing how accurate that moniker had become. Marcus checked into the Hilton under an assumed name, using cash and avoiding the cameras that now seemed to lurk everywhere. He spent the first night in a real bed in 5 years, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite exhaustion. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Catherine's face, heard her confession, felt the cold satisfaction of watching her realize she'd lost. But satisfaction wasn't comfort, and justice wasn't healing. Those were things Marcus would have to find on his own. The next morning, he met with his legal team in a conference room at their downtown office. There were 6 lawyers arrayed around the table, each with stacks of documents and tablets displaying complex financial data. The lead attorney, Michael Chen, had been working on Marcus's case pro bono for 3 years, convinced from the start that something didn't add up. "Marcus," Michael began, his voice warm with genuine affection, "I can't tell you how good it feels to see you on this side of the glass." Marcus managed to smile. "It's good to be here. Thank you, Michael, for never giving up. I never doubted you." Michael opened a folder, spreading papers across the table. "Now, let's talk about what happens next. The FBI has charged Catherine Donovan, James Westbrook, and Daniel Reeves with conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and about a dozen other federal crimes. The evidence is overwhelming thanks to the systems you had in place, but there are complications." "What kind of complications?" "Your company, Sentinel Technologies, was restructured into Raven Corp while you were incarcerated. Catherine transferred assets, sold patents, and made deals that, while fraudulent in origin, involved dozens of other parties who had no knowledge of the fraud. Unwinding all of that is going to take years." "How many years?" Michael exchanged glances with his colleagues. 3 to 5 minimum, and that's if everything goes smoothly, which it won't. Catherine hired excellent lawyers. They're already arguing that while she may have committed personal crimes, the business transactions were legitimate. They're trying to separate the two. Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing. "So even though I've been exonerated, even though everyone knows I was framed, I can't get my company back?" "Not quickly, no. What we can do is file civil suits, freeze assets, and begin the process of recovery. But Raven Corp employs 3,000 people now. Those people are innocent. The courts won't just shut it down overnight." It was logical, reasonable, and infuriating. Marcus had known this wouldn't be simple, but part of him had hoped that justice would be swift and complete. Reality, as always, was messier. "What about my reputation?" he asked. Another lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Rodriguez, spoke up. "That's already recovering. The media loves a redemption story, and yours is textbook. We've had 17 interview requests in the last 12 hours alone. 60 Minutes, Dateline, the major networks. Everyone wants to talk to you." "I'm not ready for that." "I understand, but Marcus, you need to consider this strategically. Right now you have maximum sympathy. The public sees you as a victim of betrayal, a man wronged by those closest to him. That sympathy translates to social capital, which translates to business opportunities. If you wait too long, the story will move on, and that window will close." Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. 5 years of relative silence, and now everyone wanted a piece of him. "What do you recommend?" "One exclusive interview," Patricia said. "We choose the outlet carefully, control the narrative, tell your story on your terms. Then we use that platform to announce your next move." "My next move?" Michael smiled. "You're the Alpha King, Marcus. You didn't build Sentinel Technologies by playing it safe. So the question is, what do you want to build next?" What did he want? For 5 years, Marcus had wanted only one thing: freedom. Now he had it, and the future stretched before him like an empty canvas. He could rebuild in tech, leverage his reputation and expertise to create something new. He could consult, invest, mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs. He could retire, take his hidden assets, and disappear to some island where no one knew his name. Or he could do what Catherine had never understood. He could build something that mattered. "I want to start a foundation," Marcus said slowly, the idea crystallizing as he spoke. "For people like me. People who've been wrongfully convicted, who've had their lives destroyed by false accusations. I want to provide legal support, financial assistance, job training, everything they need to rebuild." The lawyers exchanged looks, a mixture of surprise and approval. "That's ambitious," Michael said, "and expensive." "I have money, not as much as before, but enough, and I have name recognition now, which means I can fundraise. Plus, it's the right thing to do." Marcus met each of their eyes in turn. "I spent 5 years watching men who'd been failed by the system, men who were innocent but had no resources to prove it. I had lawyers, I had money stashed away, I had people fighting for me. Most of them don't. Most of them rot in prison for crimes they didn't commit because they can't afford justice." Patricia was already taking notes. This could be powerful, really powerful. The Alpha King returns not to rebuild his empire, but to help others rebuild theirs. The media will eat it up. "I don't care about the media," Marcus said, surprising himself with the truth of it. "I care about doing something real, something that can't be taken away or corrupted or turned into lies." The meeting continued for hours, covering financial details, legal strategies, and potential partnerships. By the time Marcus left the office, it was dark outside, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain. He walked instead of taking a cab, needing the movement, the cold air, the reminder that he could go anywhere he wanted now. His phone, a new one his lawyers had provided, buzzed constantly. Messages from old colleagues, from journalists, from people he barely remembered who suddenly wanted to reconnect. He ignored most of them, but one message made him pause. It was from Tommy Rodriguez, a man he'd met in prison. Tommy had been convicted of armed robbery, but had maintained his innocence throughout his sentence. Marcus had helped him file appeals, had shared legal resources, had believed him when no one else did. Tommy had been released 6 months before Marcus. His conviction overturned when security footage from the night of the robbery was finally reviewed properly. The message was simple. "Saw the news. You did it, man. You really did it. If you need anything, I'm here." T. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. Catherine had betrayed him. Daniel had destroyed him, but Tommy, a man he'd known for barely a year, was offering help without hesitation. That was the kind of loyalty that mattered. That was the kind of relationship worth building. He texted back, "Thanks, T, I'm starting something new. Might need your help." You interested?" The response came almost immediately. "Hell yes. When do I start?" Marcus smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. This was how you built something real. Not with money or power or manipulation, but with honest connections forged in the fire of shared suffering. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into establishing the Second Chance Foundation. He rented a small office in Brooklyn, hired a staff of 5 people, all either exonerees or family members of the wrongfully convicted, and began reaching out to legal aid organizations across the country. The response was overwhelming. Within days, they had hundreds of applications from people desperate for help, for hope, for someone to believe them. The exclusive interview aired on a Wednesday night in early October. Marcus sat across from veteran journalist Diane Sawyer, the studio lights hot and bright, cameras capturing every expression. He'd worn a simple suit, nothing flashy, and spoke with quiet authority about his experience. "You were at the height of your career," Diane said, her voice gentle but probing. "A billionaire, a respected CEO, a man who had everything. Then it was all taken away in a single trial. How did you survive that?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I survived by accepting that my old life was gone. I couldn't spend 5 years hoping to get it back. That would have driven me insane. Instead, I had to figure out who I was without the money, without the company, without the reputation. I had to strip away everything external and find what was real underneath." "And what did you find?" "I found that I was stronger than I thought, and that the things I'd built my identity on, wealth, success, power, those were all temporary. But the ability to survive, to adapt, to keep believing in truth and justice, those are permanent. Those can't be taken away." The interview covered his homecoming, though Marcus glossed over the personal details of Catherine's betrayal. That was private pain, not public entertainment. Instead, he focused on the foundation, on his plans to help others, on the systemic failures that allowed wrongful convictions to happen. "Some people might expect you to be angry," Diane observed, "to want revenge against those who wronged you." "I was angry," Marcus admitted. "I'm still angry sometimes, but I realized that holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The best revenge is building something good from the ashes of something terrible." The interview ended with Marcus looking directly into the camera, addressing viewers who might be facing their own injustices. "If you're innocent and trapped in a system that doesn't believe you, don't give up. Keep fighting, keep believing, and know that there are people working to fix this broken system. You're not alone." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Foundation's website crashed from traffic within an hour of the interview airing. Donations poured in, small amounts from regular people, massive checks from celebrities and corporations. Legal firms offered pro bono services. Universities wanted to partner on research. Politicians called, wanting to discuss criminal justice reform. Marcus barely slept for the next month, working 18-hour days to build infrastructure, vet applications, and coordinate with legal teams across the country. Tommy became his right hand, managing operations with surprising skill. The staff grew to 20, then 50, then 100, as the Foundation expanded. 3 months after his release, Marcus stood in the Foundation's new headquarters, a renovated warehouse in Brooklyn with glass walls and open spaces, nothing like the corporate sterility of Sentinel Technologies. A wall near the entrance displayed photographs of their first 50 exonerees, men and women who'd been freed thanks to the Foundation's work. Each face told a story of injustice and redemption, of lives stolen and then reclaimed. "Not bad for a convicted felon," Tommy said, joining Marcus at the wall. Marcus laughed. "Exonerated felon, there's a difference." "True that." Tommy studied the photographs, his expression thoughtful. "You know what's crazy? You lost everything, your company, your wife, your freedom, and somehow ended up doing more good than when you had it all. Catherine would say I was wasting potential, that I could be making billions instead of helping dozens." "Catherine's in federal prison awaiting trial," Tommy pointed out. "Maybe her opinion doesn't count for much anymore." "Fair point. Catherine's trial was set for January, 7 months away. The evidence against her was overwhelming, but her lawyers were skilled at delay tactics and legal maneuvering. James Westbrook had already pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, 15 years instead of 30. Daniel Reeves was fighting, claiming he'd been manipulated by Catherine, that he'd been in love with her and hadn't understood the full scope of her plan. Marcus didn't follow the proceedings closely. That part of his life was over, sealed behind bars just as he'd once been. Occasionally, Michael would call with updates. Catherine's lawyers had filed another motion, the judge had denied a bail request, a new piece of evidence had emerged, showing the conspiracy went even deeper than originally thought. But those were just details, footnotes to a story that was already written. Marcus had moved on, found purpose beyond profit, meaning beyond money. The Alpha King hadn't reclaimed his throne. He'd built something better. Winter came early that year, covering New York in pristine snow that made the city look clean and new. The Foundation's holiday party was held on a Friday evening in December, the office transformed with simple decorations and catered food. Staff members mingled with exonerees, lawyers chatted with activists, and for a few hours the weight of their shared mission lifted into something lighter. Celebration, community, hope. Marcus stood by the windows, watching snow fall over the city, when a young woman approached. She was in her mid-20s with nervous eyes and a tentative smile. "Mr. Donovan, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I wanted to thank you." Marcus turned, giving her his full attention. "Please call me Marcus. What are you thanking me for?" "My brother, Kevin. He was convicted of a crime he didn't commit 3 years ago. Armed robbery, like Tommy. He maintained his innocence, but no one believed him. No one except our mother, and she didn't have resources to hire good lawyers." Sarah's voice trembled slightly. "Then your foundation took his case. Your lawyers found surveillance footage that proved Kevin was at work when the robbery happened. He was released last month." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the mixture of joy and grief that came from knowing justice had been done, but only after years of injustice. "How is he doing?" "Struggling. Prison changes people, you know. But he's alive and he's free and he has a chance now. That's because of you." "It's because of a lot of people," Marcus corrected gently. "The lawyers, the investigators, the people who believed Kevin's story. I just provided resources." "You provided hope," Sarah said firmly. "When everyone else had given up, when the system said Kevin was guilty and that was that, you believed enough to fight. That matters more than you know." After she walked away, Tommy appeared at Marcus's side, 2 beers in hand. He passed one to Marcus, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the party unfold. "You ever think about going back?" Tommy asked eventually. "To tech, I mean. Building another company, making another $1 billion. Marcus considered it. Did he miss the thrill of closing a major deal, the rush of launching a revolutionary product, the power that came from running a massive corporation? Yes, sometimes, but he didn't miss the isolation, the constant pressure, the sense that nothing he did was ever enough. "No," he said finally. "I thought I would, but I don't. This is where I'm supposed to be. Even though you lost everything to get here. Maybe I didn't lose everything. Maybe I just lost the wrong things and found the right ones." Tommy raised his beer. "That's some fortune cookie wisdom right there." Marcus laughed, clinking bottles. 5 years in prison gives you time to think deep thoughts. Or maybe you're just getting old and philosophical. I'm 38, like I said, old. The camaraderie was easy, genuine, built on shared experience rather than shared profit. This was what Marcus had been missing during his years at Sentinel Technologies. Not success, but connection. Not power, but purpose. The new year arrived with a bitter cold snap that froze the Hudson and turned the city into a crystalline wonderland. Marcus had moved into a modest apartment in Brooklyn, close to the Foundation's headquarters. It was a far cry from Rosewood Manor. 1 bedroom, exposed brick walls, second-hand furniture, but it felt more like home than that mansion ever had. On a Thursday morning in January, Michael called with news. "Catherine's trial starts Monday. The prosecutors want you to testify." Marcus set down his coffee cup carefully. "Do they need me?" "They have the recordings, the financial evidence, the testimony from Daniel and James. But having you on the stand telling your story directly would be powerful. It would put a human face on the damage she caused." "Will she be there? In the courtroom?" "Of course. She has a right to face her accusers." The thought of seeing Catherine again made Marcus's stomach twist. Not from love or hatred, but from a complicated mixture of pity and revulsion. She'd been the center of his world once, and now she was just another defendant, another person who'd chosen the easy path of crime over the hard path of honesty. "I'll do it," Marcus said. "When do they need me?" Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Federal Courthouse downtown. The weekend before the trial, Marcus retreated to a small cabin upstate that the Foundation had purchased for staff retreats. He needed silence, needed space to prepare mentally for seeing Catherine again, for reliving the worst period of his life in front of a jury. The cabin sat on 20 acres of forest, isolated and peaceful. Marcus spent Saturday chopping wood, a skill he'd learned in prison from an older inmate who'd taught him that physical labor could quiet a troubled mind. The repetitive motion, the bite of cold air, the satisfaction of splitting logs cleanly, it all helped center him. That evening, sitting by the fireplace with a book he wasn't really reading, Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Hello? Marcus?" The voice was weak, strained, but recognizable. Daniel Reeves. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "I called your lawyer, begged him to give it to me. Marcus, I need to talk to you before the trial. We have nothing to discuss. Please." Daniel's voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve it, but please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against his better judgment, Marcus didn't hang up. Talk. Silence, then a shaky breath. "I was weak. Catherine. She made me believe you were the problem, that you'd become arrogant, that you were going to push me out of the company, that everything we'd built was about to crumble. She showed me documents that seemed to prove you were embezzling. She said we needed to act first, to protect what we'd created. And you believed her instead of asking me directly." "I loved her," Daniel said simply. "I'd loved her for years, even before you married her, and she knew it. And she used it. I'm not making excuses. What I did was unforgivable. But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was saving the company, protecting employees, doing the right thing." Marcus felt cold despite the fire. "You sent me to prison, Daniel, for 5 years. You testified against me, helped plant evidence, destroyed my life. And you did it because you were in love with my wife and too weak to see that she was manipulating you. I know, God, I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life paying for it. 15 years in federal prison, and I deserve every day. But Marcus, before I go away, I need to say this. I'm sorry. I'm so profoundly sorry. You were my best friend. We built something amazing together. And I destroyed it all because I was jealous and stupid and blind. Is that why you called for absolution? No. I called because you deserve to hear it directly. Not through lawyers, not in a courtroom, but from me to you, one friend to another, or former friend, or enemy. Whatever we are now." Marcus stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dark forest. "We're not enemies, Daniel. Enemies care about each other enough to hate. We're strangers. You killed the person I used to be, and I don't know the person you've become." "That's fair." Daniel's voice was hollow. "For what it's worth, the person I became is someone I don't recognize either. Catherine did that to both of us in different ways. Don't blame Catherine for your choices. You had free will. You chose to betray me." "You're right, I did." A pause, then, "Are you testifying on Tuesday?" "Yes." "Then I'll see you there. And Marcus, what you're doing with the Foundation, helping people who were wronged like you were, it's what we should have been doing with Sentinel all along. Building something that mattered instead of just making money. You were always better than me. I just couldn't admit it." The call ended. Marcus stood at the window for a long time, watching his breath fog the glass, feeling the weight of forgiveness pressing against his chest like a physical force. He didn't want to forgive Daniel, didn't want to understand or sympathize or see him as anything other than a traitor. But the truth, uncomfortable and undeniable, was that Daniel had been a victim too. Not in the same way Marcus had been, and certainly he bore responsibility for his actions. But Catherine had weaponized his feelings, turned love into a tool for destruction. In a different timeline, Daniel might have been a good man who made good choices. Instead, he'd been broken by someone who understood exactly which buttons to push. Marcus didn't forgive him. Wouldn't forgive him, maybe not ever. But he could see the tragedy of it. 3 lives destroyed by greed and manipulation, a decade of potential wasted, friendships turned to ashes. Monday morning arrived with brutal clarity. Marcus dressed carefully for court. A dark suit, white shirt, conservative tie. The uniform of credibility, of respectability. He met Michael outside the courthouse, where a crowd of reporters had already gathered. "Mr. Donovan, how does it feel to face your wife in court? Are you seeking revenge? What do you want to happen to Catherine Donovan? Is it true you're rebuilding your empire?" Marcus ignored them all, walking up the courthouse steps with Michael at his side. Inside, security was tight. Metal detectors. Bag searches, stern-faced marshals. They were directed to a witness room, a small space with uncomfortable chairs and fluorescent lighting. "The prosecution is confident," Michael said, reviewing notes. "The evidence is overwhelming. Catherine's lawyers are trying to paint her as a victim of circumstance, claiming she was coerced or manipulated. It's a desperate strategy." "Will it work?" "No. But it might get her a reduced sentence if the jury feels sympathetic." Hours passed. Marcus waited, trying to read but unable to focus. Finally, a clerk appeared. "Mr. Donovan, you're up." The courtroom was smaller than Marcus expected, wood-paneled and formal. The jury box held 12 people whose faces ranged from curious to sympathetic to severe. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair, presided from the bench with an air of absolute authority. And there at the defense table sat Catherine. She looked different, older, harder, her beauty dimmed by stress and fear. She wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup, the costume of the penitent. When Marcus entered, her eyes met his for just a moment, and he saw in them a desperate plea for, what? Understanding, mercy, forgiveness. He looked away. The oath was administered. Marcus placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Then he sat in the witness box facing the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named James Thornton. "Mr. Donovan, thank you for being here today. I know this isn't easy." "No, it's not." "Can you tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant, Catherine Donovan?" Marcus took a breath, organized his thoughts. "We met 12 years ago at a charity gala. I was 26, just starting Sentinel Technologies. She was working as an event planner. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, married shortly after. For the first 5 years it was good. Or I thought it was good. Maybe I was just too focused on building the company to see the cracks." "What changed?" "I think Catherine realized she wanted power of her own, not just reflected glory from being my wife. She started getting involved in business decisions, suggesting strategies, connecting me with people. At the time, I thought she was being supportive. Now I understand she was positioning herself to take over." The testimony continued for over an hour. Marcus walked the jury through the trial, his conviction, the years in prison. He described what it felt like to have everything stripped away, to be labeled a criminal, to watch his life's work dismantled while he was powerless to stop it. "And when you finally came home," Thornton asked, "what did you find?" Marcus glanced at Catherine. She was staring at the table, her shoulders rigid. "I found my wife with her lover. I found out that she'd orchestrated my imprisonment, that every piece of evidence against me had been fabricated, that my best friend had been manipulated into betraying me. I found out that the person I'd trusted most in the world had destroyed me for money and power. How did that make you feel?" "Objection," Catherine's lawyer called. "Relevance. Your Honor, the prosecution is establishing the emotional impact of the defendant's actions." "I'll allow it. But get to the point, Mr. Thornton." "Mr. Donovan?" Marcus considered the question. "It made me feel like the previous 10 years had been a lie, like I'd built my life on a foundation of sand, and everything I'd believed about love and loyalty and trust was false. It made me feel—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Hollow." The cross-examination was brutal. Catherine's lawyer, a man named Richard Moss, tried to paint Marcus as a neglectful husband, an obsessive workaholic who'd driven his wife to desperation. He suggested that Marcus had been complicit in financial irregularities at Sentinel, that the company's success had been built on questionable practices. Marcus weathered it calmly, answering each question with precision and restraint. He'd known this was coming, had prepared for it with Michael. The truth was his armor, and Moss couldn't penetrate it. Finally, after nearly 3 hours, Marcus was dismissed. He left the witness stand without looking at Catherine again, walked out of the courtroom into the hallway, and felt something inside him finally release. It was over. Not the trial that would continue for weeks, but his part in it, his obligation to relive the pain and betrayal, that was done. He'd told his truth, and now the jury would decide what to do with it. Michael caught up with him by the elevators. "You did great. The jury was with you the whole time." "I just want it to be over." "Soon. The prosecution rests tomorrow. Defense will present their case, but they don't have much. Catherine might not even testify. Her lawyers think putting her on the stand would be too risky." "Smart." "Marcus." Michael hesitated. "There's something you should know. The judge is allowing victim impact statements at sentencing, assuming Catherine's convicted. You'd have the opportunity to address her directly, to tell her how her actions affected you." Marcus jabbed the elevator button. "I'll think about it." But he already knew he wouldn't do it. He'd said everything that needed saying. The rest was just revenge, and revenge was a poison he'd sworn off. The trial concluded on a Friday afternoon in late January. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Catherine showed no emotion as the foreman read the list: conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, witness tampering. Each count carried years of prison time. Sentencing was scheduled for March. In the meantime, Catherine was remanded to custody without bail, deemed a flight risk by the judge. As marshals led her away, she finally looked back at Marcus, who sat in the gallery. Her eyes were filled with tears, her mouth moving in what might have been an apology or a plea. Marcus felt nothing. The woman being taken away in handcuffs was a stranger wearing Catherine's face, a criminal who'd destroyed lives for selfish gain. Whatever love he'd once felt for her had been incinerated in the fire of her betrayal, leaving only ash. Outside the courthouse, Marcus faced a wall of cameras and reporters. For once, he didn't push past them. Instead, he stopped, straightened his tie, and spoke. "I want to say something to everyone who's followed this case. What happened to me was wrong, criminal, and devastating. But I'm one of the lucky ones. I had resources, connections, and people who believed in me. Thousands of people every year are convicted of crimes they didn't commit, and they don't have those advantages. They rot in prison while the real criminals go free, and no one fights for them. That's what the Second Chance Foundation is trying to change. We're working to reform a broken system, to provide legal support for the wrongfully convicted, and to ensure that justice isn't just for those who can afford it. What Catherine did to me was terrible, but it opened my eyes to a much larger problem, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to fix it." The questions came fast, overlapping. "Do you forgive your wife? What do you think her sentence should be? Will you ever rebuild Sentinel Technologies?" Marcus held up a hand. "I don't forgive her. Not yet, maybe not ever. That's something I'm still working through. As for her sentence, that's up to the judge. And no, I won't rebuild Sentinel. That chapter of my life is closed. I'm building something better now, something that actually helps people instead of just making money." He left them there, walked to the subway, and rode it back to Brooklyn. No limo, no driver, no security detail. Just Marcus Donovan, ex-convict and founder of a small foundation, heading home to his modest apartment. Spring came early that year, transforming New York into a riot of color and warmth. Marcus threw himself into the foundation's work, expanding their reach to 12 states and helping secure the release of 36 wrongfully convicted individuals. Each case was a victory. Each life reclaimed was proof that the system could be fixed one person at a time. Catherine's sentencing arrived in mid-March. Marcus didn't attend, despite Michael's suggestion that it might provide closure. Instead, he spent the day at the foundation, reviewing case files and meeting with new applicants. Michael called that afternoon. 23 years, federal minimum security facility, She'll be eligible for parole in 15. Marcus set down his pen. How did she react? She cried. Asked if you were there. The judge was tough, said that Catherine's crimes represented a fundamental betrayal of trust, that she'd weaponized the justice system against an innocent man, and that such actions demanded serious consequences. It was actually a pretty powerful statement about the importance of truth in the legal system. Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing the information. 23 years. Catherine would be in her late 50s when she got out, assuming she served the full sentence. The irony wasn't lost on him. She'd stolen 5 years of his life, and now she'd lose more than 4 times that amount. Daniel? 12 years. His cooperation and early guilty plea worked in his favor. James Westbrook got 18. Thank you for letting me know. Marcus, are you okay, really? Was he? Marcus looked around his office. Walls covered with photographs of freed individuals, stacks of case files representing people still fighting for justice, a team of dedicated staff members who believed in the mission. Outside his window, Brooklyn was alive with the sounds of spring, children playing, music drifting from open windows, the eternal rhythm of a city that never stopped moving forward. Yeah, he said, surprised to find it true. I'm okay. That evening, Marcus walked to Prospect Park, found a bench overlooking the lake, and sat watching the sun set. People passed by, joggers, couples, families with strollers, all living their lives, carrying their own stories of joy and pain, triumph and loss. He was just one person among millions, no more or less important than anyone else. The Alpha King was dead. That persona, the billionaire tech genius, the man who commanded rooms and conquered markets, had died in a prison cell 5 years ago. What emerged from those ashes was something simpler and more genuine. Marcus Donovan, a man who'd survived hell and chosen to help others do the same. His phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. Pizza at headquarters. Victory celebration. Get your ass over here. Marcus smiled, stood, and headed back toward the foundation. On the way, he passed a newsstand where his face stared back from magazine covers. The Alpha King's New Empire. From billionaire to champion of justice. Marcus Donovan's second act. He didn't stop to read them. The headlines didn't matter, the public persona didn't matter. What mattered was waiting for him at headquarters, a team of people who believed in something bigger than themselves, working to fix a broken system one case at a time. The Foundation's main room was transformed, filled with staff members and exonerees sharing pizza and stories. Someone had strung up lights, turned on music, created an atmosphere of genuine celebration. When Marcus walked in, a cheer went up. "Speech!" someone called out. "No speeches," Marcus said, grabbing a slice of pizza. "We're just here to celebrate." But Tommy wasn't having it. He climbed onto a chair, whistled for attention. "Listen up. I know Marcus hates being the center of attention, but tough. Today, the woman who tried to destroy him got what she deserved, and instead of being bitter or broken, this man built something that's changed our lives. So we're going to raise a glass, or a beer, or a slice of pizza, to Marcus Donovan, who showed us that justice might be slow, but it's real." Glasses and pizza slices lifted. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion he didn't expect. These people, many of whom had lost years to wrongful convictions, who had every reason to be angry and broken, were celebrating not revenge, but the possibility of redemption. "To justice," someone called out. "To second chances," another voice added. "To Marcus," Tommy finished, and the room erupted in agreement. Later, as the party wound down and people started heading home, Marcus found himself on the roof of the building, looking out over Brooklyn's lights. The city stretched endlessly in every direction, millions of stories unfolding simultaneously, each one unique and important. A door opened behind him. Sarah Mitchell, the young woman whose brother Kevin had been freed by the Foundation, stepped out into the night air. "Mind if I join you?" "Please." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Sarah spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said at the trial, about feeling hollow when you discovered the truth about your wife." "Yeah?" Kevin felt the same way when he was convicted, like everything he'd believed about fairness and justice was a lie. It almost broke him. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. But then your foundation took his case, and someone finally believed him. And that feeling of being seen, of being valued, of having someone fight for you, that saved him. You saved him. Marcus shook his head. The evidence saved him. The truth saved him. No, Sarah said firmly. The truth was always there. What saved him was you caring enough to look for it. That's what the foundation does. It tells people they matter, that their lives are worth fighting for. Do you know how rare that is? Marcus thought about the letters that came to the foundation daily. Desperate pleas from prisoners and their families, stories of injustice and abandonment, cries for help that too often went unanswered. The need was overwhelming, the resources always insufficient. But every case they took, every person they helped, was a small victory against a vast system of indifference. I just don't want anyone else to go through what I did, he said quietly. And that's why it matters. Because you're not doing this from some abstract moral principle. You're doing it because you know exactly what it feels like to be trapped and helpless and forgotten. Sarah turned to face him. My brother is alive because you refuse to let bitterness destroy you. 35 other people are free because you chose to build instead of burn down. That's not nothing, Marcus, that's everything. After she left, Marcus remained on the roof, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. 5 years ago, standing in his kitchen discovering his wife's betrayal, he'd been consumed by rage and grief. The man he'd been, the Alpha King, would have sought maximum revenge, would have used every resource to destroy Catherine and everyone involved. But prison had changed him. It had stripped away the ego and arrogance, the belief that he was somehow special or immune to suffering. It had shown him that beneath the wealth and power, he was just human, vulnerable, flawed, capable of being hurt like anyone else. And in that realization, paradoxically, he'd found freedom. The foundation grew steadily over the next 2 years. By Marcus's 40th birthday, they'd expanded to all 50 states, employed over 300 people, and helped secure the release of 147 wrongfully convicted individuals. Major law firms partnered with them. Universities conducted research on their methods. Politicians cited their work when proposing criminal justice reform. Marcus dated occasionally, but nothing serious. The wounds from Catherine's betrayal had healed into scars, visible but no longer painful. He learned to trust again, slowly, cautiously. He made friends outside of work, joined a gym, started playing basketball again. Life became normal in a way it never had been when he was building Sentinel. Daniel Reeves sent letters from prison. Marcus read them, but never responded. They chronicled Daniel's journey through guilt and regret, his attempts to make amends through prison ministry, and counseling other inmates. They asked for forgiveness without demanding it, acknowledged responsibility without making excuses. Marcus kept the letters in a file marked someday. Maybe eventually he'd be ready to respond, to offer if not forgiveness, then at least acknowledgement. But that day hadn't come yet, and he didn't force it. Catherine never wrote. According to Michael, she'd withdrawn into herself in prison, refusing most visitors, spending her days in the library. She'd aged rapidly, the photos from her annual review hearings showing a woman hollowed out by consequence and regret. Marcus felt a distant pity for her, the way you might feel sorry for a stranger experiencing hardship. The woman he'd loved was gone, if she'd ever truly existed. In her place was someone he didn't know and didn't need to. On a humid evening in late June, Marcus stood before a crowd of 2,000 people at the Foundation's annual gala. It was held at a convention center in Manhattan, a far cry from the modest office they'd started in. The room glittered with formal wear and jewelry, filled with donors and supporters who'd made the Foundation's growth possible. 5 years ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying through the sound system, I walked out of prison with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and a determination to rebuild my life. I could have become bitter. I could have spent my energy on revenge. Instead, I chose to focus on something bigger than my own pain. He gestured to the screen behind him, which displayed faces of the freed individuals. These are the real heroes, men and women who survived wrongful conviction and emerged with their humanity intact. They're proof that justice, while sometimes slow and imperfect, is worth fighting for. The crowd applauded. Marcus waited for silence before continuing. But we can't stop here. Right now there are thousands of innocent people in prisons across this country. They don't have resources, they don't have connections, they don't have hope. Our mission is to give them all three. To fight until the system works for everyone, not just those who can afford it. More applause, enthusiastic and sustained. Marcus smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility and privilege. He'd been given a second chance. Now it was his job to extend that opportunity to as many people as possible. After the speeches, after the dinner and dancing and fundraising, Marcus found himself on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights stretched to every horizon, a galaxy of human ambition and struggle. Somewhere out there people were being arrested, tried, convicted, some guilty, some innocent. The machine of justice ground on, imperfect but necessary. "You did good tonight," Tommy said, joining him on the balcony. "Raised almost $4 million. We'll need twice that if we want to expand into juvenile justice cases." Always thinking ahead, Tommy lit a cigarette, offered one to Marcus, who declined. "You ever miss it, the old life?" Marcus considered the question honestly. Did he miss the adrenaline of closing billion-dollar deals, the power of commanding a tech empire, the luxury of unlimited resources? "Sometimes," he admitted, "but then I remember what that life cost me. The isolation, the constant pressure, the feeling that nothing I did was ever enough. I was successful by every conventional measure, but I wasn't happy. Didn't even know what happiness looked like. And now I know. It looks like Sarah's face when we told her Kevin was being released. It looks like the team celebrating after winning a difficult case. It looks like waking up every morning and knowing that the work I'm doing actually matters." Marcus turned to his friend. "The old life made me rich. This life makes me human." Tommy nodded slowly, exhaling smoke into the night air. "The Alpha King is dead. Long live Marcus Donovan." "Long live Marcus Donovan," Marcus echoed, and meant it. Years passed. The Foundation became an institution, cited in Supreme Court cases and criminology textbooks. Marcus's story became legend, the billionaire who lost everything and rebuilt as a champion of the wrongfully convicted. Universities offered him honorary degrees. Politicians sought his endorsement. Hollywood wanted to make a movie about his life. He declined most of it, staying focused on the work. Awards and recognition were nice, but they weren't the point. The point was the mother who got her son back after 12 years of wrongful imprisonment. The point was the man who could finally hold his daughter, who'd been born while he was locked away for a crime he didn't commit. The point was every life reclaimed, every family reunited, every victory over an imperfect system. On his 45th birthday, Marcus took a rare day off. He drove upstate to the cabin the Foundation maintained, seeking solitude and perspective. The forest was alive with early autumn color, the air crisp and clean. He chopped wood, made a fire, sat on the porch watching deer graze in the meadow. His phone stayed in his pocket, mostly silent. A few texts from staff members wishing him happy birthday. A call from Tommy checking in. A message from Michael saying the latest appeal had been successful. Another innocent person going home. As evening approached, Marcus pulled out a journal he'd started keeping in prison and continued to this day. He wrote about the Foundation's progress, the cases that haunted him, the successes that made it all worthwhile. He wrote about Catherine, serving year 10 of her sentence, reportedly teaching other inmates to read. He wrote about Daniel, released on parole after serving 8 years, now working construction and attending therapy. And he wrote about himself, the man he'd been, the man he'd become, the distance between those two versions of Marcus Donovan. The Alpha King had been powerful but empty, successful but alone, respected but not truly known. He'd built an empire on ambition and intelligence, but those were fragile foundations. When tested, when betrayed, when stripped of external validation, that version of Marcus had crumbled. The man who emerged from prison was different. Smaller in some ways, certainly less wealthy and less influential in traditional terms, but stronger where it mattered, in character, in purpose, in the ability to survive and adapt and find meaning beyond material success. That man had built something that couldn't be taken away through betrayal or fraud. He'd built a legacy of justice, a foundation literally and figuratively, that would outlast him. Future generations would benefit from the work he'd started, from the cases they won, and the precedents they set. As darkness fell and stars emerged overhead, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in his years as the Alpha King. Peace. Not the absence of struggle or pain, but the deep satisfaction of knowing his life had meaning beyond himself. He'd lost everything and gained something better. He'd been destroyed and rebuilt stronger. He'd faced the worst humanity had to offer and chosen to respond with compassion rather than bitterness. The Alpha King was dead, but Marcus Donovan, advocate, fighter, human being, was fully alive. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all.